Jesus called all of us to be witnesses, didn't he? And they've just been witnessing. And that's all I can ever do is just witness what God has already given to us. Just things that I've experienced. I have nothing of myself. And let's not forget that Jesus said of himself, he could do nothing. It was the Father in him that did the works. And that same Spirit of the living God abides, dwells, lives in each of us. It just depends upon how much we believe it, how earnestly we seek it and desire it, and how willing we are to follow the leading of his indwelling Spirit to lead us into that wonderful place. Today we're living in times when we must. Half-hearted, lukewarm Christianity will not save our world. And Jesus is depending upon each of us being his witnesses. And the world is judging God and Christ by the way we live it. They're not listening much to what we say, but they are watching our lives. And when our lives really speak, I don't mean speak with the mouth, but speak with the lives, people cannot resist what they see and feel and experience. Now, I have learned through my several great illnesses and God's compassion in healing me, I have learned to let him do anything he wants. And I find that every great thing that's come to me, he pushed me in almost. And usually in these greatest experiences, I almost had to be pushed. I never would have chosen. I wouldn't have thought I could be ready for that. But some of my greatest experiences have been with these top scientists. I think I told you yesterday morning about my first experience being with Dr. George Washington Carver in 1939. He was the first one that made known to me that we were then in the greatest scientific age the world had ever known. But it was only a preparation for the greater age to follow in the early 60s, the Kingdom Age. The Kingdom Age that we're already in. And yet I'd say most Christians aren't aware of it. But we must be aware and ready. Then my next experience along these lines, and that began the very next year, was with these 12 chosen men of prayer, with world vision, that Glenn Clark called into being. And I named them yesterday, but for the benefit of those that were not here, it was Glenn Clark when he saw a Second World War coming on, when we'd fought a war to end all wars, when we'd raised one generation of youth for peace and love and brotherhood, and he saw that they were going to have to go out and fight. And it just broke his heart. Now, Glenn Clark was a man that faithfully kept that quiet listening time and let God speak to him. And whatever the Lord showed him to do, he dared to do it. And so in his quiet time, he said to the Lord, what can we do? A generation trained for peace and love and brotherhood going out to fight. And the Lord said to him, what did Jesus do when he started his ministry? The first thing he did was call his little group to train them, to teach them his way and his truths, and to make them know that they too could go out and do it. And his only plan is, you are my witness. And every soul every day is witnessing what we are. And if you call yourself a Christian and you aren't living it, you're not making a very good witness. You're not letting the world think that Christianity amounts to much. because you're not proving it. And so he said, all right, Lord, who shall I call? The Lord said, call 12 people with a great world vision who are totally yielded to me, that I might speak through and prepare for these great days. And he said, all right, Lord, who would you call? And the first name given him was Frank Laubach. You won't find anyone in the world with a greater world love, a greater eagerness to live for the world and make any sacrifice necessary to bring the world to Christ than Frank Laubach. The next one was Stanley Jones. I want you to notice that practically all these are different denominations. God isn't much concerned with our denominational name. He looks at the heart. He wants to see how closely we're following Jesus. Now, Frank Laubach is a Congregationalist. Well, of course, he was born a Methodist. He was educated in Princeton. But in order to go where the Lord was leading him, down to this cannibal island, why, he had to become a Congregationalist. Didn't make any difference to Frank what his title was. He followed. But today he's supposed to be a member of the Congregational Church. The next one was Rufus Jones, a Quaker. I didn't tell you about Stanley Jones. I think everybody knows he's a Methodist. Rufus Jones, that great Quaker saint. Samuel Shoemaker, Episcopalian. Walter Judd, I don't even know. But everybody knows Walter Judd knows that he really radiates Christ. Dr. George Washington Carver, Baptist. Elton Trueblood, another Quaker. Starr Daily, well, a redeemed prisoner. Glenn Harding, who is now our executive director of Koinonia, a Methodist. And Dr. Abram Verady, who began the Breakfast Club prayer groups, now International Christian Leadership, with really prayer groups all around the world. For wherever we've been around the world, we've found the Breakfast Club prayer groups. In 1960, I think it was, we were in Berlin. And we had asked for a private, we usually asked for a private dining room because we always had a large group, and following breakfast, we always had our quiet time, our hour of spiritual growth. And so they'd given us a section of a large banquet room with doors that let down in between. And we'd finished our breakfast and we began our hour of spiritual growth with a hymn. And on the other side of the doors, why, men's voices joined in with us. They were singing in German and we were singing in English, but we were both singing the same things to the same God. And we were rather surprised but delighted to have men's voices joining in with us. And when we finished our hymn, they started a hymn. And we knew their hymn by the tune, and we sang with them. Then when we finished their hymn, why, we started up, "What a friend we have in Jesus." We didn't know who they were, but they knew our hymns and we knew their hymns, and we knew that we were friends. And they sang, "What a friend we have in Jesus," with us. A waiter came in and I said, "Who is this singing with us on the other side of the doors?" Oh, they said, "A Breakfast Club prayer group meets in that room 3 mornings a week." It was one of these international Christian leadership groups. So Dr. Abram Verady is the one that God used to start these groups. Well, we had 12 men of that type, that stature, that variety. that started this. And then the second year, 1940, they invited in 12 women to meet with them. Now, they always spent the first hour of the day reading the scriptures together, I mean out loud. Everyone thinking the same thoughts at the same time. You know, that togetherness, that in one accord, in one place, is powerful. And we used all the methods that Jesus gave us to find his truth and his way. Then after that hour of listening for him to speak through the scriptures, we each went apart, separate, with our notebooks and our Bibles, to listen for what the Lord wanted to tell us as a chosen group, above and beyond the written page. For oh, he has so much he wants to tell us today. What we've already heard is not enough to win the world for Christ and stop all wars and bring abundant life to every soul, regardless of their condition. But God has the plan ready. And anyone who will take time to know the truth that has been revealed and listen, God is waiting to reveal to us and give us the power and the plan and the means and the courage even to follow him into the kingdom. Well, they were glorious days. And we were told over and over. Now, the mornings we listened, in the afternoon and evenings we shared. And we had enough that was given each of us when we shared it all to fill up the afternoon and evenings with what God had shared with us. But over and over, the Lord said to our group, you're in the greatest scientific age that's ever been known. But it's only a preparation for the greater age that is to be, and it will begin in the early 60s. We were told that over and over. Then in about 56, I was called to Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Now, I'd been to Oak Ridge, Tennessee when it first started in 49. Well, they had invited me to be the conference speaker of a conference retreat, Holston Conference it was, that was going to meet in this new town that was beginning, Oak Ridge, Tennessee, right out in the mountains. And all there was there was a tabernacle and a corner grocery store, general merchandise, country store with everything, and a gas station. A few houses sprinkled around, but I wondered why in the world would they have a conference retreat in a place like that? Because no one explained to me that this was the beginning of a new venture in science, where laboratories were being built hidden under those tall Tennessee mountains, and so well concealed under the trees that no airplane ever flying above can ever see them to destroy them. They didn't tell me that. They just asked me to come and lead a conference retreat, and I thought, well, they really retreated all right. They had found the most far-off place that could have ever been found. Well, a couple years later, they wrote and asked if I'd come back to Oak Ridge for a retreat, and I thought, why go back to a corner grocery and a gas station and a tabernacle with perhaps 2 or 3 people, because I knew it was the conference that had filled up the seats. So I always had a good reason why I couldn't go. But in about 56, I was leading a retreat over in Knoxville, Tennessee. And that's only about 60 miles from Oak Ridge. And so I had a letter from them saying, now we see that you'll be in Knoxville, Tennessee. Could you possibly give us several days, either before or afterwards? We'll pick you up in Knoxville or wherever you say, and we'll deliver you back to an airport. And well, I had to say I was going home after that. And if they really wanted me that much, that they'd come after me and deliver me back to the airport, why, I decided I could go. So they met me after the day apart and took me over and put me in a hotel that would do credit to any big city. My, I was surprised. It was quite a city now. And a group had dinner with me, and then they took me to their church, and it was a great big church with 3 full-time ministers, seated nearly 2,000 people, and it was filled in the evening. And as I looked out over the audience, there was more men than women. And I'd never seen anything like that. Now, I used to go to conference all the time, and sometime at conference you might think there was more ministers there than wives and visitors. But it was the first time I'd ever looked over a church service and seen more men than women. So I leaned over to the minister sitting next to me, and I said, "Where'd you get the men?" He said, "They're scientists." I said, "Do they know I'm talking on prayer?" He said, "That's why they're here." And I'm telling you, that set me to prayer. Scientists here because I was talking on prayer. Well, they had a nice devotional for which I was deeply grateful. I didn't hear it. I was listening to the Lord. And I said, "Lord, if ever you had nothing, it's today, it's tonight. You've got nothing." But Jesus said he was nothing, and you used him mightily. Now put that Holy One in front of this nothing, and I know it'll make at least 10. But maybe with the Holy One in front, you could make it 1,000. But here's nothing. It's offered to you. Please do something for these scientists, because I don't know how to talk to scientists. Well, I haven't any idea what I said. I don't remember one thing. The Lord took over. Really, when you mean it and hand yourself over, he takes over. Well, the scientists kind of surrounded me afterwards and said, "We meet in the hotel where you are for a 7 o'clock breakfast each morning. Would you meet with us?" I said, "I'd be glad to." They said, "Well, now, when we say 7 o'clock, that means we're seated at the table at 7. Would you meet us in the lobby at 10 minutes of 7? I said, "Yes, I'll be glad to." And so when I got in the lobby that morning, there were 70 top scientists waiting. We went in their private dining room, and everything was on the table. You didn't have to wait for anything. We had the blessing, and in 15 minutes, breakfast was over. But it gave me a chance to say to the speaker, to the leader who was sitting next to me, "What do you expect of me?" He said, "Miss Eggleston, we know your whole life has been a training in prayer. We know you've centered your whole life in the art of prayer. Everything we've found in the right use of the high energies here, we found through prayer. And we want to know everything about prayer that you can tell us. There is no other way to find God's secrets except through prayer. Prayer is the only medium between man and God. And every secret we've found has always been available to anyone who would listen and be prepared. You couldn't tell the secrets of trigonometry to someone that had never studied geometry or arithmetic. You've got to have your preparation. But when you have your preparation, God is always ready to give you the larger unfoldings. And he said, everything we have found down here, we've only discovered things that have always been, and we discovered it only through listening prayer. Now we want to know all that you can give us." Well, I talked for an hour and tried to sit down, and they said, "Go on, go on. Your next appointment is 10:30, and it's only 10 minutes away, so go on, go on." Well, I talked another half hour. And then I said, "Won't you let me sit down? Won't you tell me some of the things that God has been saying to you? For I have the opportunity of spreading it all over the world." So they let me sit down. And then they told me some of the marvelous things that God had been saying to them. And they thought they really were going to surprise me when they let me know that we were in the greatest scientific age that had ever been. But that God had made it known to them that it was only a preparation for the kingdom age. And then they watched me to see if I was going to faint when they said, and he's let us know it's going to begin in the early 60s. Didn't surprise me a bit. I'd been hearing that for 15 years. Yes, God will reveal his secrets. He will show us his way and lead us in it and offer us everything necessary to fulfill it. When we're ready to lose ourselves, our littleness, our weakness, our humanness, our frailties in his almightiness. And you'll never find him on any other terms. We have to lose our lives to find his life. But his life is always available. It's always sufficient. And he's always ready. So, that was my next experience with scientists. And then for the last 2 years, and this seemed like an accident too, I've spent a week for the last 2 years in Huntsville, Alabama. Now, Oak Ridge is where they're working with the atomic energy. But down in Huntsville, they're working on top space, a new realm. They call it the moon. But things beyond our even comprehension right at present. And so I got to meet these wonderful scientists down there. I'm going to bring you some echoes from these today. And then I think I told you yesterday how I didn't want to go to New Jersey, but I got pulled up there last May. And that was where I found these wonderful things that Dr. Cressy Morrison has been offering the world. And so this morning I want to share some of these things with you. Are you ready to open your hearts and minds and listen to some of these greater things that Jesus said he had to unfold? He said, all these things that I do, you may do also, and greater things, because he goes unto the Father, but he lives in us. He said, I have so much to tell you, but we weren't able to bear it then, but today we must be ready to listen and obey and follow and make real to this world the things that God is offering to bring peace on earth and abundant life to every child of his the world over. And so I have some of the wonderful things that Dr. Cressy Morrison gave me last May, and maybe it's well to begin with that, because he makes you see the greatness of God. You'll find these things printed in a little book of Dr. Cressy Morrison's, and he is the president of the New York Academy of Scientists. And his book is 7 Reasons Why a Scientist Believes in God. And this is the way he gave it to us in this little group that I met with last May. And I made these notes. Now, I'm not giving you all that you'll find in that wonderful book, but I'm giving you all I could grab and write fast while he was talking of the things that you'll find in that book. Are you all hearing me? Is there anyone not hearing because I'm not holding the mic? If there's anyone not hearing, there are front seats. And I cannot talk day and night and strain my voice. So if you're not hearing, I'm inviting you to come up front. Or I don't believe I can read these papers and hold that mic in between the paper and me. Now, Dr. Morrison said, during this great scientific age, Every increase of scientific knowledge and each new discovery has revealed more brightly the handiwork of an intelligent creator. God has created everything that's ever existed. In the beginning, there was only God. And he's created everything in existence out of his own spirit of love. Dr. Morrison goes on to say, stupendous discoveries have been made through a spirit of scientific humility and faith, grounded in knowledge, and it's the only way we'll find God's truth. Through a spirit of humility, grounded in faith. Humility and faith grounded in knowledge. They were the things that Jesus taught. We've got to lose ourselves. Lose yourself and let him do the speaking. Let him lead you into understanding these things I'm going to say. And take your faith. Now remember, your faith is not in yourself. Your faith is in God, who owns all things, holds all things, and offers us all things. So get your faith right there in him. He wants to tell us something today. So every discovery they've made has been through humility, coming into the presence of God, knowing that it isn't we. It's not any of our brilliance that's going to do this, nor our worthiness. We come in with humility. But we come with faith that God has something to offer us. But we must be grounded in the knowledge that he's already given us. Lots of us want him to give us a lot when we don't know the things he's already revealed. Now we must know the truth that he's already given to be ready to receive these larger truths that he's waiting to offer. He said, through our scientific discoveries, men are approaching ever nearer to an awareness of the living God. My 7 reasons for my faith are these. First, God's unfailing laws. By an unwavering mathematical law, we can prove that our universe was designed and executed by a great engineering intelligence. Yes, it took all the wisdom of God to create this marvelous universe of ours. So many exacting conditions are necessary for life on this earth that they could not possibly have existed in proper relationship by chance. For instance, our earth rotates on an axis that revolves at the rate of 1,000 miles an hour. Did you know you were spinning around at the rate of 1,000 miles an hour? And I know some people won't ride in an airplane because they think it's too fast. Here they've been sitting on this earth, spinning around at 1,000 miles an hour all their lives. Now these things are proven. These are not just nice statements. We are proving that our earth is rotating at the rate of 1,000 miles an hour. Now if our earth turned at only 100 miles an hour, our days and nights would be 10 times as long as they are. And so the hot sun burning for 10 straight days at a time would burn up every vegetable and everything that's living. And a 10-day not long nights would freeze anything that's left even in the ground. So God, by timing our day and our night, gives us the warmth and the cool, the warmth and the cool that makes life and preserves life and increases life. And so that 1,000 miles an hour isn't an accident. It's the only way this earth could be right and productive. Now he said our sun has a temperature of 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Our earth is just far enough away from this eternal fire to warm the earth rightly. If we were much nearer to the sun, it would roast us. And if we were much farther away, it would freeze us. And then he said the slant of the earth tilted 23 degrees. You remember when you were studying geography? And that old earth sat up there crooked? I always felt so bad about it. I always wanted to go and set it straight. I didn't think any earth ought to be leaning. But now I know why. The tilt of our earth, the slant of our earth, it says, tilted 23 degrees, keeps the vapors of the ocean from piling up continents of ice when it's cool. And if our moon, which controls our tides, were nearer by 50,000 miles, and 50,000 miles isn't so much when you consider the distance of our sun, but if our sun were 50,000 miles nearer, our tides would be so high twice a day that every continent and every mountain would be submerged. Even the mountains would soon be washed away. Now, if the crust of our earth were 10 feet thicker, there would be no oxygen by which animals and vegetations could live. You see all these things that God has made so infinitely perfect? We've just accepted them as though they happened. None of these things happened. God thought them out. God created them in just the perfect right way. Then he said if our oceans were deeper, carbon dioxide and oxygen would be absorbed by its depth. And in our ocean there could be no life. There is not one chance in billions that our universe could be an accident, or that it just evolved without our divine intelligence directing every bit of it. You know, I had never thought of how wonderful this world is. Don't you wish every one of our children would be taught these things and made to know them? Now, that's his first reason for knowing that God created the world and made it just right. His second reason is this: the resourcefulness of all life to accomplish God's purpose is a manifestation of an all-pervading God. All life is made of spirit. I brought that out yesterday. You can take anything in this universe to the laboratory and break it up into its lowest element, and you have only energy. Spirit. You can take the rocks, the trees, the flowers, anything. When you break it up into its lowest element, you have energy, spirit. All life is spirit. Spirit has no weight and no dimension, but spirit does have power. A growing root coming up through the crack of a rock will eventually split the rock in two. Life has designed everything. Every leaf, that life is with a capital L. It's Jesus who is life, for all things were made through him and by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. So it's really, this is referring to Jesus as life. Life has designed all things, every leaf, every flower, every color, every sunset. Life taught the birds to sing, the insects to meet their needs. Life gives taste to the fruit, to the vegetables, the meat. Nature did not create life. And we often speak of nature. Well, nature is an expression of God's way. It took an almighty, divine, infinite wisdom to plan and direct the life on our universe. That's his second reason for believing in a great divine intelligence. His third is the instinct of animals proves conclusively that a great creator infused an instinct in each one of them. For instance, the salmon spends years at sea, but he always comes back to the very river or tributary where he was born to spawn. 2 years ago, I was in the Washington State Cascades CFO camp. And on our way back, we drove by the Columbia River, and there was a place where there was a waterfalls of about 12 feet. And my driver said, "We're going to sit here. I want you to see the salmon going back to spawn." And they're swimming back against the flow of the river, and when they get to this falls, they have to leap the falls to continue their course. But they do. And we sat there and watched the salmons leap that 12 feet of falls. Several times they didn't make it, but they never gave up until they did make it and went on back to their tributary. That's instinct. That's God's intelligence in even a fish. If you were to catch one of these salmons or any of these fish and take them away from their own tributary, they'll fight their way back to the very place where they were spawned. Eels are the same. They may travel far, but they will eventually come back to their own breeding place to die. No American eel has ever been found in any foreign waters. The instinct of an animal. And God has given us so much more than instinct. He's given us a mind. And it's a part of his mind. And we're all capable of receiving any thought that God wants to give us when we cultivate that listening and sit expectantly and quietly as he thinks his thoughts through us. Now, the animal instinct is his third means of believing that God created everything and directs it. Then his fourth is that man has far greater power than an instinct. Man has been given reasoning powers. Instinct is like a single note of music, lovely, but limited. The human brain contains all the notes of all music. Man is what he is because he has received a spark of God's divine intelligence. What have we been doing with it? What have we been doing with this spark of God's intelligence? We surely haven't made the most of it, have we? That's his fourth reason for believing in God. His fifth is, life is revealed in such phenomena as the wonder of the genes. Now, these genes are so small, and remember, each of us came from one tiny gene. That's the spark of the divine. That's the little gene that held your personality and all the potential power for you to become what you are and a whole lot more than you've ever made of yourself. It all came from one tiny gene. Now, these genes are so small that if all the genes that are responsible for everyone living on earth at this time could be put together, we would have less than a thimbleful of genes. The billions of people that are living on earth today came from less than a thimbleful of genes. Can you take in something of the wonder of God? Yes, every little seed has the life of God and the power of God and the plan of God there to fulfill what God wanted it to be when it's given back to God. But the thing is, we haven't given ourselves totally back to God. A thimble could hold all the individual characteristics of 3 billion human beings. For in that invisible gene were all the characteristics that God has given to you. Your personality, everything. Here is really evolution. Yeah, but, as we call it, so tiny in its invisibleness, but containing enough of God's Spirit to evolve an individual different from everyone else in creation. We can't take in the wonder of God, can we? We are forced to realize that only God's infinite wisdom, this is the 6th reason, that 5th was the genes. Now the 6th is this. We are forced to realize that only God's infinite wisdom could have designed and directed such amazing wonders. He sent bees to extract the honey to feed man, but at the same time carry the pollen from one flower to another to fertilize and continue life. Everything in God's universe has its own mission to fulfill. And everything except man has been fulfilling God's purpose. He didn't make us do what he put us here to do. He let us choose, that we might choose to be sons of God. That was the 6th reason. Now his last reason is this. The fact that man can even conceive of a wonderful God such as he, a God who helped bring into being the added wonders of life. Man's perfected imagination becomes a spiritual reality in bringing into being the perfection of God's great plan. He isn't going to do it without us. He's given us a definite part in making this earth like heaven. He's waiting to lead us into our part, to furnish everything and direct it. But he's not going to bring this kingdom on earth until we yield our lives and follow him into our part. Man's perfected imagination becomes a spiritual reality in bringing into being God's great divine plan to make this earth like heaven. And he ended his talk that day with, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork." Doesn't that make you realize what a great God we're worshiping, and how much he is depending upon us? Now I want to share with you a few statements from Dr. Pollard. I let you know yesterday that Dr. William G. Pollard is still the executive director of Oak Ridge Institute of Nuclear Studies, which is composed of 37 different universities, all having a part in these scientific discoveries. But he was so impelled to give these things to the church. He said these things that scientists are finding and proving, they ought to be revealed through the church. And the church is not aware. And the church must be aware. It is the church that God is depending upon to make these things real, and it is not going to be done in any other way except through the church. And so Dr. Pollard, one of their very top scientists in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, resigned there. He's still the head of this commission. And he has accepted a church, St. Francis Episcopal Church in Norris, Tennessee, and he is out proclaiming these truths. Now, he's written a book called Chance or Providence. And the average person seems to think that the world just chanced to be like this. But his book is written to prove that nothing happened by chance. Everything in God's universe, God directed. He thought it out and brought it into being for a definite purpose. And so these are a few statements from Dr. William G. Pollard. He said, the truly free man, and every soul on earth wants to be free. It's innate in every soul to want freedom. And so he said the truly free man is one who wills to do great things without being arbitrary in his own self-will. You want to be used. You want to be a part of these great things, but you're not going to say it's got to be done my way. Now, I'll just not open my mind to something that's different from what I've been taught by my grandmother, or that my church has it in their articles of faith. You've got to have your open mind. God is leading us on. And sometimes these things seem to contradict. A half-truth often seems to contradict. But if you're following Christ, don't be afraid. So he said the truly free man is one who wills to do these great things without being arbitrary in his own self-will. He believes he's made of God's Spirit. He believes that he's a part of God's great, divine, eternal purpose. He believes that there is a divinely appointed destiny for every soul in all of God's creation. God didn't put anybody here just to bump through life. He created every soul to have some part in making this world a better world. And most of them don't know that there is such a thing, and we who have had such advantages have done so little to make it real. He believes that each individual has a definite part in bringing God's all-enveloping plan into fulfillment. God never forces us to fill our waiting place. But that inner divine hunger will never be satisfied until we do yield to its leading and follow Christ into our divinely appointed place. Nothing less than what God wants you to do and be is ever going to make you really happy and healthy and peaceful and joyous. But when you just turn yourself loose and say, all right, Lord, lead me along, I'll follow. Don't forget, he only asked you to follow. And you can follow. Like Abraham, we must go out not knowing whither we're going, but trusting God's unfailing light to lead us step by step. We will find in this magnificent adventure all that our faith can envision. It is essential that we sacrifice our way and yield our wills to his will for the betterment of these vaster needs of others. And really, you're not finding life that's really happy just pampering yourself. It's when you do lose your life and you are interested in everybody else's needs, and you let the Lord use you to meet these needs, that's when you find life. And you find it in all its fullness. We will each one have unlimited opportunities to prove our faith in God's unfailing goodness and his ability to triumph over every seemingly impossible situation. God's indwelling spirit can keep us serene, confident, and joyous in the midst of life's deepest difficulties. This is the journey that each soul must make to find life in all of its fullness. Most people have journeyed through life without finding their true goal, not realizing the wonder of God's happy way that is forever waiting, offering us all the wonders our Savior came to bring mankind. We too can face temptation, suffering, persecution, even crucifixion, and keep that peace that Christ made real when we know that he lives in us with all his resurrection power. These deeper virtues can only be known as we follow Christ in loving service to his lowliest ones. He's calling today as never before to go and feed my sheep. Go and tend my sheep. I wish everyone could have been with us on our African tour last fall and see these needs there in Africa and know how he needs us to understand and help. Love is the only thing that can break down these fears and these prejudices, these tensions. He didn't call us to be his lawyers and to go out and argue for him. Just go out and love them. Every barrier falls before love. And really and truly our churches there and our missions are doing wonderful work. They are proving God's love. But oh, they're only a drop in the bucket to what must be done. We must send out individuals, people to people, like the Peace Corps. But they've got to go out to help them in every need and love them regardless of the circumstances. That's the way Jesus did it. And it's the only way it's going to be done. These deeper virtues can only be known as we follow Christ in loving service to his lowliest ones. We've lost the wonder of his way because we've failed to lose our human egos and discover Christ within us with his almighty triumphant power. Now there are a few notes from Dr. William Parker. I want to bring just a few notes from Dr. Von Braun down in Huntsville, Alabama. Are you getting tired? Do you want to stand a minute and relax before I start in on this? Come on, stand up and stretch. Just stretch real big. Well, why didn't you come up front? Where I can't possibly hold that, I don't think, and read too. I'll try it. All right, now let's sit down again. Dr. Von Braun from Germany, of our great German scientist who is the head of all this scientific work in Huntsville, Alabama. These are some things that he said. Science and faith are the two dominant powers in our century. You know, a generation ago or two, why, they thought science was fighting religion. It isn't. Half-truths kind of look that way sometimes. But science is proving our faith more than anything else. And our scientists are leading us out into deeper ways of faith than I've ever dreamed of before. So science and faith are the two dominant forces in this country, this century. We must try to understand their nature if we're to comprehend some of the most serious problems of the era in which we're living. Now, the mainspring of science is curiosity. Since time immemorial, there have always been men and women who felt a burning desire to know what was under the rock, beyond the hills, and across the oceans. This restless group now want to know what makes an atom work. Through the process, by what process life reproduces itself, or what is on the far side of the moon. You see, he brings out two. It isn't the moon they're seeking. It's something beyond the moon. But also there would be a single great accomplishment. There would not be a single great accomplishment in this history of mankind unless we had faith. Any man who strives to accomplish something needs a degree of faith in God, but also in himself. We've got to believe that God wants us to be his co-partner and follow him. So we've got to have first a faith in God, but also we have to have a faith that we too can follow him and measure up. And whenever he takes on a challenge that requires more moral strength than he can muster with his limited material and spiritual resources, he must have faith in God. Now, one of the most crucial issues in our time lies in the fact that modern science, along with miracle drugs and our vast communications, has also produced nuclear bombs. It cannot be denied that science has failed to provide a practical answer on how we can cope with these in a constructive way. We have learned the wrong use of these powers, and as a result, science and scientists have often been blamed for the desperate dilemma in which mankind finds itself. Science by itself has no moral dimension. The drug which cures, when taken in small doses, may kill when taken in excess. The nuclear energies that produce cheap electrical power, when harnessed in a reactor, may kill one when it's abruptly released in a bomb. Thus, it does not make sense to ask a scientist whether his findings are poison or not, or his nuclear energy is good or evil. It depends upon what you do with these things that makes it good or evil. And so the realization that science is unable to control the possible abuse of the forces it has made available has led millions of people in the world to a new interest in religion. Well, I think we've been pretty slow in showing it, though, don't you? Everybody has been willing to take all the scientific findings and use them. But oh, we must realize that these are meant to make us take hold of the greater powers and win the world. This great religious revival shows that there is a widespread realization that in this nuclear age, man has a desperate need for stronger ethical control of our immeasurable physical forces that have been unleashed. Well, I'm glad he's a man of vision, and I'm glad he thinks that the world is undergoing a great religious revival. I have seen it. I know it is, but I didn't realize it was going in any great, amazing way. I know we are reviving, but I've been so concerned because we're not reviving faster. But I believe it's going to come with a great, much greater impact than ever before. Now, this is headed our battered churches. He might say our sleeping churches. But many people find that the churches, those great bulwarks of faith, are now badly battered by the onslaught of 300 years of scientific skepticism. This has led many to believe that science and religion are not compatible, that knowing and believing cannot live side by side. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Science and religion are never antagonistic. On the contrary, they are absolutely a part of each other. While science tries to learn more about the creation, religion is trying to better understand the Creator. One is the way, but one is the beginner, the cause. While through science, man tries to harness the forces of nature around him, through religion, man is trying to harness the forces of nature within him. Oh, I wish that every minister, every time he went in the pulpit, would remind people that he lives in us. For it's only this divine power within us that's yielded to God, given back for him to direct, that's going to lead us out of the conditions our world is in. I'm going to read that statement again. While through science, man tries to harness the forces of nature around him, through religion, man tries to harness the forces of nature within him. And too long we've thought of God up in the skies, way off, when he lives in us. Science may not have a moral dimension, but I'm certain that science, in its search for new insights into the nature of our creation, has produced new ethical values all its own. Most certainly, science has fostered veracity and humility. Again, it is a mark of all true science that its findings are valid and objective for all times and all people. That these findings demand unconditional acceptance, and that once proved correct, they must be universally embraced. Not just our favored lands. It's got to be made universal. If man has ever come close to finding an answer to Pontius Pilate's question, what is truth? Science is showing the way. Personally, I believe in the ultimate victory of truth. We all would claim that, wouldn't we? But we aren't claiming it with our lives. We give our mental consent and we'll speak it out in our rituals, but we're not speaking it with our lives. I am confident that to the extent that we shall learn more about God's nature and his universe, we shall not only arrive at universally accepted scientific findings, but we shall also arrive at a set of universally accepted rules and standards for human behavior. The materialists of the 19th century and their Marxist heirs of the 20th century tried to tell us As science gives us more knowledge about our creation, we can then live without faith in any creator. You know, we've gone through that. God's dead. We just sank mighty low, didn't we? Yet, with every new answer, we have discovered new questions. The better we understand the intricacies of the atomic structure, which is the nature of life, it is the Master's plan for all of his galaxies, the more reason we found to marvel at the amazing wonder of God's creation. But our need for God is not based on awe and wonder alone. Man needs faith as much as he needs food and water and air. With all the science in the world, every man needs faith in God. And wherever faith in ourselves is reached its limit, let's learn to put our faith in God. Now, these are just some of the thoughts from some of our top scientists that are really making our church come back and take hold of these great things that God's been offering, that Jesus came to make real, that promised to all of us. Yes, we are heirs of God. We're co-heirs with Jesus. But how little we've accepted.